Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome production designer Mark Scruton, who joins us to talk about their work on season 2 of Wednesday. Mark will talk us through the creative decisions made for the second season of the show. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Mark. Hi, Mark. Thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're here to talk about Wednesday season 2, which came out last year, but we, in the run-up to Emmy nominations and all that jazz, managed to thank you to Christy for organising this interview with Mark. Before we jump into the production, how have you found the reception to the second series?
Good, actually. I mean, it's always dangerous, isn't it, when you have something that was such a big hit as the first season, which caught us all a little bit off guard, I have to say. But then you try and follow that up and do something that you think is, as good, but you want people to respond to it as well as the first season. It was nerve-wracking, but I think, it was pleased that people seem to have reacted well to it. I don't think we repeated ourselves with it. I think we told new stories and, new environments, and it was a relief that it seemed to get a positive response overall. I thought it was, we didn't embarrass ourselves, as they say.
I think there's always like a pressure of coming back for season 2, but then also this got to lead my next question, is that do you feel the pressure coming back for another season? Is there a part of you that kind of feels like I've kind of done my creative part, I kind of want to try something else? Or is it because you know that for a second season there's going to be more, it's going to be bigger, and you kind of want to continue that creative journey?
I mean, it's a very mixed bag, I think, coming into it. I mean, it was nerve-wracking going into the first season because it was Tim Burton, it was the Addams Family, and it was all the things that were attached to that. And I think going to the second season, the nervousness came from wanting to do the second season justice, but then there was a lot of excitement about the fact we were getting to revisit the world, we were getting to expand it. We had more scope and scale to dig into it. We understood the show more going into it the second time. So actually, for me, it was a really good feeling going into it. And it's interesting because boringly, in the run up to it, we've been doing Beetlejuice, and initially it didn't look like I was going to be able to be involved in the second season because the two things overlapped, and there was a strong desire to get the show made, which was understandable, but it really wasn't going to work for me to do two projects at the same time, no matter how much I wanted to do it. So I had to kind of come to terms with the fact I was probably going to have to give it to somebody else to run with and say goodbye to it. But I'm going to say fortuitously, but it wasn't fortuitous for most of us in the industry. There was a big writer's strike, which kind of threw everyone's schedules in the air. And when the chips re-landed at the end of it all, it turned out that we could finish Beetlejuice and then we could go on to do season 2 of Wednesday. So for better or worse, that's how it happened. And I was very grateful in the end that I got the opportunity to sort of carry on with it. But it was a funny journey getting there.
Yeah, I think that whole sort of time feels like a bit of a blur, really.
Yeah, it's very much so.
Just seemed to like stand still, really, which it's quite scary to think. But then also, again, the stars are aligned and you're able to sort of do both, which I guess as well, like in a way that you're kind of coming off Beetlejuice and then coming on to something like this again, where you're continuously working with Tim and probably some others as well, where there's a crossover. That must make things so much easier, knowing that you just have a shorthand, or like not even a shorthand, because there's been a number of probably years they've been working together. It's probably like more of a hive mind in how things work.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes, you definitely have a shorthand, and yes, you definitely, you want to think you have more of an understanding. But I mean, Tim's never as predictable as you think he's going to be, and nor are the showrunners Alan Miles. They're always pushing me and the show to do things that maybe you weren't expecting or you weren't considering. And from my own point of view, you don't want to go into it going, yeah, this is going to be great. I get it now. We're going to This Is Gonna Be a breeze. And I was very conscious about that actually going into season 2 more than I had been going into Beetlejuice, actually, that we couldn't just rest on our laurels and do the easy options all the time. I mean, I went into that with some quite sort of radical ideas, which I sort of forced myself to do to try and make sure that I wasn't just coasting along with the role, with that vibe, which you could easily do, I guess, but I didn't want to do that because that's a dangerous road to go down, I guess.
I think it feels like maybe then you just sort of copy and paste from maybe previous films or even in the show itself. And like as a designer, because you're creating those worlds, and also the fact that you've moved from Romania to Ireland, that's probably played a bit of a different way in the way you might design, just because of the stage space, but then also locations where it will have to double up with different places. But as a designer, like, what do you do to push yourself? Because it feels like sometimes if you have to go to the gym, for example, where it's like you have to push yourself to go, but once you've done it, you're like, I don't know what was all that, what the fuss was about.
Well, I mean, yes, it was interesting. I mean, changing countries was definitely a good, how shall I phrase it politely? It was a good jumping off point to sort of reapproach it all. I had to go and spend a long time scouting. We looked at different countries, different ways of approaching it, and I spent a long time scouting Dublin before we actually decided that Dublin was going to be the right fit for us. And it gave us challenges and it gave us opportunities. The challenge was that Dublin is probably even less like America than Romania is, and it has less of the type of architecture that we were leaning into in the first season. I mean, Romania was very good at giving me a very good steer on the stylistic qualities of it. Something probably I wouldn't have done if I hadn't gone to Romania. It gave me a real open door to sort of looks that helped the show immensely, and I would forever grateful for that to Romania and the crews there. But I then had to try and maintain that in a completely different country with a completely different aesthetic. So we had to make sure that we could maintain the style of the show that we'd set down, which gave us a challenge in itself. You can't go to Dublin and say everything's going to look like it's now in an Irish castle, because it wouldn't work and people would scream foul, and that's not what we want. So luckily we did find places in Dublin which could work well for us, and we obviously had to lean more into the Nevermore world anyway, so it gave us opportunities to build and expand that world and create some very big new exciting sets, which we probably wouldn't have done if we had moved, and it gave us different ways of approaching it. And from my point of view, I went in there with some quite complicated ideas, certainly for Iago Tower and how that was going to work. And I wanted to approach that with the view that we wanted to try and get as much of it for real as possible, and build a world that was tactile, and that's obviously most designers going with a degree of that. But the way Alan Miles, the showrunners, work and the way Tim works is we want to create believable environments and do everything as much as we can for real, and that may lead you down paths that are probably too complicated, but you've got to aim up here and then slowly ratchet it down to fit into the box you've got to fit into, and economics and everything have a part in that. But it was a good jolt to everybody to sort of reinvigorate the show.
Yeah, I think it's probably could be quite simple, especially if you go to a second series and it's quite a popular show. I'm going to assume that you might have a bit more money, that it might be easier for you guys just to do sort of green screens and sort of let VFX sort of not take over, but play a bigger part in the world building rather than having the practical sets. Granted, they probably do get involved in it, but it's probably easier for them when things are more practical than it is sort of green screen later down in the line. And how they kind of want to play with like size and whatnot with the show. I think it's interesting as well, like when you're talking about the different, like when you do the location scouting and how that probably that first sort of few times places that you probably looked at, you're like, you know what, it's not really going for America, but we have to figure something out. And then I guess conversations with your set deck team as well to see how you can dress what they can acquire as well, and the props team as well, and how they can get creative with the space in those situations. I think it's also, as you're saying, like not resting on laurels. Like it must be so difficult though as well when you're moving over to somewhere else to sort of basically start from the beginning again, but then continue have that sort of that continuity from the previous season as well.
Yeah, I think, we carried basically one set over, verbatim from season 1, which was Wednesday's Dawn, which was kind of a no-brainer. That had become the sort of linchpin. We intended to be the linchpin, but it become the sort of this emblem of the whole show with a split window. So that we knew we had to recreate, pretty much exactly as it was, even though we had hardly none of it left from the first season. So we had to copy it sort of forensically. But it was a good exercise, and you're right. You have to sit down with the teams there. It was an entirely local team that I worked with out there. I brought my set decoration from London from season that I'd used on season 1. But other than that, we had entirely local crew who, could. I didn't know they didn't know me, and we had to build up that level of trust. And they stepped up to the plate, remarkably, and built me some amazing things. And we did some pretty tricky engineering work on some of the sets. And you have to trust the people that you're working with, that they can deliver what you're trying to achieve. And you do. I visited locations several times before we started to gel and figure out which bits would work. And it's funny, I'm season 3 at the moment, and the stuff that I scouted way back on season 2 that I'm now just pulling out the back of my brain going, oh, hang on. We did look at that on one of those road trips. We looked at that, and that actually might work. So it's a very evolutionary process, the whole thing about moving country, but also just understanding where you are and what works and what locations you have and how that whole system works. And it was good. It stops you repeating yourself. I think if we'd gone back to all the original sets in Romania, it might have been a very different show, for all sorts of reasons. But
yeah, I think it goes back to that whole copy and paste sort of thing, really. But even when you have starting someone new, obviously there's probably, I know people get chosen as an interview process and so on and so forth, but how do you go about making sure that you and the team are gelling, not just creatively, but also as like co-workers as well, because you'll be spending a lot of time together. You don't really want to push the wrong buttons with each other.
No, and I, as sort of the head of the whole machine, so to speak, it's my job as much as anything to be able to get on with everybody else. The fact of the matter is, I think we had one of the biggest, if not the biggest, art department that Ireland had ever really had at one point. So I pretty much had everybody that was available came and worked on the show. But all my HODs, were people that I got through recommendations and from talking to people and understanding who the talent was, which is what you do, and I've worked away enough times to understand, you get a feel for who's the right person to talk to. And, I've worked my way through the department over my career. So I know what I'm looking for in other people that I'm employing to work with me. So you do your best to get on with everybody, but most of the time, you're working with like-minded people and certainly with this show, the benefit of this show is the fact, and it was even true of the first time, even though nobody knew what the show was, but they knew who was doing it, and that brings with it a certain, kudos that brings the talent, which I'm, very lucky about. You say you're doing a Tim Burton show, and people tend to, you tend to be able to get the right people turning up, mercifully. And we got the right people turning up. So I was very lucky for that. But then, you have to work with everybody. So, and the teams, we had 200-300 people probably at one point, and it's part of your job to get on with everybody and make the team work. So
Yeah, I think it just, again, I think once you like, name drop Tim Burton, I think people, it's like a certain cachet to it, and people will perk up. But then also know that, like, if you're gonna come to the big league, you need to make sure you bring your A game as well.
Exactly, and people want to be there. The people that are there want to be there, and they want to be doing a Tim Burton show, and that's the thing that drives it. We have a lot of very talented people working for us, but they all want to deliver something that is worthy of that sort of that environment. So it sounds a bit cocky, but it does help a lot actually when people are driven in that way.
Yes, and I think as well, like I agree that it sounds a bit cocky, but I think it's also just the pressure that people are under when it comes to these sort of shows, because it's also it reflects on you as a HOD and others as well if people aren't pulling their weight or doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, because then I guess it's like a domino, like it's like I'm going to swear anyway, so it's fine. It's like when shit trickles down, like the hill.
I mean, it just makes my job a lot harder. If you haven't got a team that is stepping up to the job, it just makes my work a lot harder, because you've got to spend a lot more time quality controlling and pushing and cajoling and getting involved in areas where you wouldn't necessarily have to get involved to make sure that the standard doesn't drop. And you're always as good as your team, but your involvement in that team goes up and down depending on the quality. And if you've got people that you trust and work well with, then it's simplistic. But my job's much easier because you trust people and you know what you're going to get is right. But if it's if you haven't got the right team, you've just got to work a lot harder to make sure that the goods are delivered. I'm very sort of lucky that we got great teams, and I trusted them, and over the this current season, the last season, we've built a very good language and a very good working relationship with all the people on the crew, and it's a joy to work with them. They're all very talented, and it's great.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, people are able to showcase their work on something like this because it's a show that goes out to 72 countries instantly once it's released, which I feel like it's such an amazing thing that Netflix are able to do that, so that people don't need to wait weeks or months for like a staggered release, and people can like just instantly devour your work and how it looks.
Yes, I try not to think about that too much. When you put it like that, it sounds quite terrifying. I mean, I think.
Oh dear, sorry.
No. It's the trick with this whole show is to not think about the realities of it, and and it's great because Tim loves working in a very closed environment. We have the studios are ours. We're very much cosseted in our nice little bubble of production, and it becomes very much focused on about generating the product. You don't think about the bigger, the sort of circus that surrounds it, which is good because you don't get that sort of paralysis which could come with the pressure of what you're trying to do. And I think that's driven by Tim. I think he likes being able to work in that environment, and it helps everybody else as well. You're not constantly thinking, oh my god, 72 countries. They're all going to judge me on what we do in the next 24 hours. But it's good in that respect. And Tim's very good at building that creative base.
I think as well, like, maybe because you're just so into it that you won't think about it, which is one thing, but then also, part of it is probably quite scary knowing that all these people.
But it wasn't until you said 72 countries.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
Then I just want to go back to like the practical side as well, because I think on the show a lot of sets are built, and obviously got location work, which has the practical side. Then also there's things like animatronics that play a part in the show. And when you have things like those where it's like a separate department, how do you collaborate with other departments so that they can play in your space, but then also you can take into consideration things like that might fill the sets?
Yeah, I mean, certainly with the animatronic side of it and the model making side of it, we work very closely with them. We're very much an intertwined department, and I think that shows. But you're always homogenous with that sort of stuff. Animatronic characters normally end up having costumes. You have to involve the costume department in it. Even if those costumes are on a model or a character or a doll. The doll basement was a good point in question for that one, where we had the serial killer's basement in the beginning of episode 1, and that was full of dolls, and all that went through costume and model makers and special effects. It was a very much a concert attempt to get everything to work together. And Colleen's obviously worked with Tim for years and has a greater shorthand with him than anybody does. So it's very easy working with her in that respect, because she knows exactly what he wants, and we have a good understanding of what we're trying to get to, and the model makers are excellent at creating the things that we draw up. And I'm very thankful for the fact that it works very well in that respect, and the teams are all close together on site, and we visit each other regularly, and we understand what each other's doing, and also we understand the pressures different departments are under, which I think is as important as anything. If you're rolling into a model makers and saying, I need 20 of these made by Tuesday, if you don't understand what else they're doing and what other things are feeding into that department, you very easily get told what to do. So we call ourselves all the different departments, but in the end we are just one big machine. And I think that's same with any production, but this one particularly is it's so fast moving that you have to be in tune with everybody else.
So animatronic side and model making side, I think if people, even if it's just Wednesday or other shows, the work that people do is absolutely incredible. And then same with like when Wednesday, just the detail of it, I think, I don't know how people manage to get so much detail into something so small, considering like in my mind, if I am to build something or draw something like on paper, I do stick figure, and I'm like, I've absolutely nailed it there. But then you see all this work with people who are able to do those sort of things, and it's just
wow. It's the process, and it still amazes me. And I've worked in the industry for probably 30 years, and it still amazes me the level of creativity that comes out of people, the way you can join the dots between, as what effectively was initially a pencil sketch in my notebook, which then goes to the concept artists and the model makers and the 3D model makers and the the engineering people that make up the mechanics of it all, and the electronics, and the painters and the finishers and the people that apply the hair and the wigs and all those things. And that can happen in a period of sometimes even days, but certainly weeks and months. And it just happens. It happens in a way that's balletic sometimes, because it sort of makes my head melt when you draw a picture and then 3 weeks later something turns up that's incredible and makes people literally stop what they're doing and look at it. And somehow it happened. And I don't think there's any other industry in the world that can make that sort of thing happen in that space of time with that level of creativity and ingenuity. But it comes down to the people. Everybody knows their job, and everybody is very good at their job, and all those things work together, and it's never fails to amaze me either.
I think because I work in film and TV, I think for me it's like the holy moly moment is when you see an empty stage and then you come back 6 weeks later and they're like, we're gonna just need the riggers to come in to rig the lighting, and they're ready to shoot, and you walk around, you just think, this feels like a real office, like proper functioning office. Obviously there's no electricity to like the monitors that they've set up or whatever, but it's just like, wow. And what people can do, and the creativity, as you said, even from like the sketches, the schematics and whatnot, to go from there, then the final thing, it's just amazing. And I feel like sometimes you do have to pinch yourself, because it is like, that's the magic. And I think that's the sort of magic that is sort of like what's spoken about. And especially when they have those like coffee table books of people's work, and you see like the artwork of films and different TV shows, it's like that's what is like the amazing thing. And it's like the whole collective work of everybody as well.
No, it's 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 the reason I do it. It's the reason I get out of bed in the morning, because it's it's the most stressful job I think there is. The inconsequential stressful job. But it's a joy to do it, because you are creating these worlds. As you say, you meet everybody, you have the meetings, you have the discussions, you go away, and then you invite them back 8 weeks later and go, here's what we've done. And it's exactly that. It's that moment of handover where everyone's just like, what? This is incredible, what have you done? And you're showing somebody around a palace, or a haunted castle, or a dungeon, or a asylum, or all the stuff that people couldn't quite imagine when you had that first discussion. Suddenly they're stood in it, and you're showing them around and showing them all the details and the world you've created. It's the best job in the world.
Yeah, and I could imagine as well, just like when you're standing there, sort of maybe the weekend, the Friday before they shoot there on the Monday, being like, yeah, we are ready. This looks incredible. And everybody's absolutely nailed it. And you're right. And I think it's like, there's an old saying as well. It's like, if a film crew was washed up on a desert island, they would somehow be able to make it better and actually live there because of their ingenuity and how quick they can do things.
Yeah. As long as they had the whole department and one of them didn't make it, then you'd be in trouble. But,
yeah, it's like, where's the plasterer gone?
Well, exactly. Yeah, we can't do it. We haven't got the head painter. No, it is great, and it always amazes me that they let you do this. It sort of always fascinates me. It's like we stood back from the link set that we built this year, with the big sort of Nevermore exterior, and you stood looking at it and go, wow, somebody just let me build this. Somebody said, sure, that looks like a great idea. You go off and do that. And there's this sort of a lot of broken people, sort of exhausted, but it's everyone with that set particularly, everyone was very pleased with it when they walked away. So
I think that's probably a really good way to end the episode. Is I can't believe they allowed me to build this.
I never can. Every time it's like they let me do this.
No, not just that, you're getting paid to be allowed to do that.
Well, there is that as well. Yes, that's a bonus for sure.
So, yeah, I think that was a really good way to end the episode. Mark, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Wednesday season 2 streaming now in all 72 countries, 72 plus countries. Go out and watch Mark and his team's amazing work. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
You take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.